What is the virtue of selfishness? How could someone possibly claim selfishness as a virtue? After all, since you were a toddler, you've been taught that being selfish is evil. You've more than likely been told by everyone that it is best for you to give what you have earned away and expect nothing in return, that giving is better than receiving. You've been taught that the livelihood of your neighbor is more important than your own. You've been told to give to those that beg. You've been told that righteousness lies within the man who gives the shirt off his back to freezing street children, and wickedness lies within the man who sits upon his throne sharing nothing of what he has. First off, let's think about what the word selfishness actually means. The actual dictionary definition is, in concern with one's own interest. However, as Ayn Rand once said, quote, in popular usage, the word selfishness is a synonym of evil. The image it conjures is of a murderous brute who tramples over piles of corpses to achieve his own ends, who cares for no living being and pursues nothing but the gratification of the mindless whims of any immediate moment. End quote. The word and concept of selfishness does not include a moral evaluation, nor does it reveal to us what the individual's interests are. If a man is selfish, we have no idea what his interests are. The only thing we know about that individual is that he pursues his own interests, or only concerns himself with the things that interest him. This means that if you have any interest whatsoever, whether it be mountain biking, playing computer games, spending time with your wife and family, or even gardening, whatever it may be, these things are your interests. They are what you have determined to be of value to you, and the lengths in which you strive to achieve these values is the measurement to how selfish an individual you are. The most basic value, and therefore being the standard in which you evaluate all objects and actions, is your life, if you desire to live, and how you wish to spend each moment. It is by your own rational judgment and how dearly you value your own life that you apply value to an object or an action. As Ayn Rand said in her book, The Virtue of Selfishness, quote, the moral purpose of a man's life is the achievement of his own happiness. This does not mean that he is indifferent to all men, that human life is of no value to him, and that he has no reason to help others in an emergency. But it does not mean that he does not subordinate his life to the welfare of others, that he does not sacrifice himself to their needs, that the relief of the suffering is not his primary concern, that any help he gives is an exception, not a rule, an act of generosity, not of moral duty. That is marginal and incidental, as disasters are marginal and incidental in the course of human existence, and that values, not disasters, are the goal and the first concern and the motivative power of his life. End quote. Love for your family and friends is an extremely selfish behavior. It is from the happiness that you receive from them that motivates you to maintain relationships. It is a colossal waste of time and energy to keep up a farce just to be friends with someone you despise, so you can feel selflessly righteous. You get the emotional response of happiness from being around like-minded individuals who share the same values as you do. All forms of love are a response to similar values. All forms of hatred are a response to the values that you do not have, or that you are opposed to. The more values you share with the person, the greater the emotion of love or of friendship. The statement that opposites attract couldn't be more false if taken literally. You will never see a Nazi man married to a Jewish woman who got together on the principle that she hates Nazis and he hates Jews. There are many that argue if everyone is selfish, then what reason is there to treat your neighbor with respect? Why not just go rape and pillage his home? If my interest is money and power, why not? What's to stop me? I will answer this partially with a quote from Rand. Quote, there is a fundamental moral difference between a man who sees his self-interest in production and a man who sees it in robbery. The evil of a robber does not lie in the fact that he pursues his own interest, but in what he regards as to his own interest. Not in the fact that he pursues his values, but in what he chooses to value. Not in the fact that he wants to live, but the fact that he wants to live on a subhuman level. End quote. If you think it's far more rational to live like a crook, take a moment and think about the kind of changes in your life you would have to make in order to actually have a successful life as a thief. It takes a ridiculous amount of consistent genius to stay one step ahead of your pursuers, the ones whom you have robbed. Every robbery increases your list of enemies by one. That's one more person you would have to outwit. Then think about your life now. Many of you Probably have jobs and enjoy an evening at home with your wife or husband, eating a delicious dinner and watching a movie with your kids. Or perhaps you like to go out on Friday nights with friends after a long week in order to unwind a bit. Now, none of this would be possible if you were reduced down to constantly scheming plans in order to not only make your next score, but in order to dodge the people who are trying to stop you. You can forget about having any kind of emotional relationship with anyone. Forget the home. A permanent place of residence would be the most fatal of follies. Any free time between your scheming will have to be spent scavenging for shelter and food and trying to stay anonymous. The only thing that keeps man from killing one another is the fact that it's far easier to sustain life by means of living and peace than by means of constantly waging war. As a living organism, we are faced with a choice to either live or die. Since we cannot live isolated away from other men and are forced to interact, we have to find a means to deal with one another. We have two options: trade or force. We can either trade our productive capabilities for something of value to us with another individual, or we can force another individual to give us what we value. The latter leads to chaos and suffering and death. You cannot have both. When you deal with someone in force, expect in return to be dealt with by force. The desire to live and all values that proceed as a consequence from that desire is exactly what being selfish is. It is not being selfish that reveals the morality of a man's character. It is his interests that are either good or evil.